Hello Facebook friends, I'm coming back to you with my third video. Um, Still Tula focused. I seem to be in a bit of a, I wouldn't even say rut because it's just too fabulous for words. But what I want to do is talk a bit about my, and I'm going to say this wrong, La Pasca quilt. Now Tula on this, well, I should start by saying it is a miserable October afternoon. So the light in here is awful, so I apologise for this glowing orb. But a couple of weeks ago, Tula talked about her La Pasca quilt, and I was looking at the shapes in that, and I thought, you know what, that is a much more interesting quilt than what I was planning to do, which was the Tula Nova. And the shapes for the paper pieces looked pretty similar to me, so I sat there and worked it all out, and I'm just reusing my Nova pieces. However, my quilt, I gave it a quick measure just on one of the roses, and it's going to be massive. I'm looking at like 3 meters by 3 meters, but I have a super king size bed, and to be fair, I'm really enjoying this. I can always stop at any point, but what I want to do is talk a bit about my process, talk a bit about my pattern, and then as this is the first EPP that I have ever made, talk about kind of trying to eat the entire cow in the first instance. There are two really key things that I have learned in the last couple of days, and I am going to kind of do a call out to my Facebook friends here because I'm part of a lot of Tula or EPP or kind of specific sewing groups on Facebook, because let's face it, I really kind of just want to talk about sewing because what's happening in the world at the moment is really quite depressing. So focusing on the beautiful things and the beautiful fabrics that everybody has really is kind of floating my boat in this time. So the La Pasca quilt, if you haven't heard about it, I think kind of looks like a mass of stained glass rose windows. So if you think about the window that you get in Notre Dame, etc., it just looks fantastic, and they're all rings, and they're made up, or the La Pasca quilt, which I think is supposed to look like a mille-feuille, you know, the glass paperweights with all the little flowers in it. Again, flowers, roses, it's a theme. So I'm going to show you my pattern. I am crap at editing, so let's just bear with me while I change the video. Ooh, I don't know if that's going to work. Let's do it this way. So that is my La Pasca quilt pattern. It's really just made up of pentagons, diamonds, these kind of, I suppose, like marquisite looking diamond shapes, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Diamonds, marquisites, pentagons and stars. And there are a number of roses. Now, I printed this off, and this is how I've kind of broken up my pattern. I've broken it up into 23 roses. Let me just turn this over, because this is how over the top I am about things. So I have 23 centres, and a centre is made up of these diamonds, 5 of them together, and I have 3 full rings. I have this number of small rings, medium star rings, half rings, and then a super large ring at the bottom. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to do each ring in a specific range of fabric, and then to bring the fabrics together. So I hope this is coming through all right. Anything that's not a ring, so this was my Elizabeth ring, which I finished, so I'll show you that. But everything that's in grey around the edges, I decided I was going to use the true colours or the minerals or the, what's it called, fairy dust, because those were supposed to be blenders and they mix with all of the colours. So what I've done is I've kind of pulled out specific rings, so a small ring, partial rings. This is my mega ring down the bottom because it has 2 rows of stars, and then I've got some partial rings. So a partial ring might just be the centrepiece with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. And then this is a full kind of star ring. And I've also been playing around with the idea of using some of the shapes. So while this is a star, but then actually notice that some of these are hearts. And you'll see up here, I've also got some other heart shapes that have come in. So I started kind of thinking about how can I make this more interesting. So a Nova quilt was pretty much probably the size of a mega star, I think. And I just thought, you know, first quilting pattern, why not just go way over the top and do something that's going to take 5 years? Because that's the kind of person I am. And I've got 4 other quilts because I normally use my lovely Bonina in order to sew quilts. I normally do machine sewing, but now I've decided with lockdown and 2 children that I'm going to be doing more paper piecing, because I can sit with the girls and I can paper piece and I can put it down, pick it up, but I get moaned at because if I'm in my sewing room with all of my wonderful bits and pieces and with the door closed, I get told off because I'm ignoring the family. So what I wanted to do, so let's start by showing you my Elizabeth centre. So Elizabeth is my favourite, next to Foxnap, because I love foxes, I love British wildlife. Our house is full of art, kind of animals, penguins, all sorts of bits and pieces, because it's just what I like. But I really fell in love with my Elizabeth. So this is my Elizabeth Rose. So you'll get an understanding about size, because this equates to this little ring here. So if you think that that's 1, 2, 3 across, maybe 1, 2, 3 down, that is the best part of a metre. It's a pretty hefty quilt. To which my other half said, "Oh, are you making that for the girls?" I was like, "No, it's going on our bed." The sheer look of fear on his face that he realised how bright and colourful our bedroom was now going to be. So, as I mentioned, the main reason why I wanted to do this video, and I'm hoping it's not going to be too long because I do have a tendency to waffle, was I wanted to share 2 really amazing game changer tips that I have discovered recently. Now, there used to be a channel in the UK called Sewing Quarter, and it really kind of got me into the kind of quilting bug. I mean, my bestie, and she made this fabulous topper for me, it's a table topper that my sewing machine sits in. She made me this wonderful pincushion, and somewhere else, which is something that I have to say I didn't think I was going to be able to use. My room is a tip, was a little thread catcher, which seems to have gone walkabout, which I suspect one of the girls has got hold of and is probably playing with. That's really kind of sitting down on an afternoon. I had a baby last year, so I was on maternity, and I really started watching this, and I started seeing all these fabulous patterns and fabrics. And to be fair, if you're on maternity, you really don't want to make clothes, because let's face it, you're a little bit than what you used to be. So I thought, right, I'm going to start doing some craft sewing, and it's really kind of taken over. I made my mum and my stepmum a coat a couple of months ago, and I made curtains for the girls' room last weekend. But apart from that, I've really not been doing very much kind of machine sewing at all. So back to the topic at hand. So I have my Aurifil Tula variegated collection, and I do want to go and buy the Sunrise collection, because I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, 20 rows or 20 different colours for 60 quid, that's not bad, especially considering these are normally about £4. So I thought, might get myself some of those, but I do have to wait until the end of the month because I spend far too much on sewing stuff. And if the doorman, or if the postman knocks on our door anymore and my other half gets wind of it, I think I'm going to be for the chop. So we'll stick to what we've got. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's watched all of the Tula videos, because to be fair, they are fab, and it was the first 3 videos that she put out that really kind of got me into EPP. So I was talking about the Sewing Quarter sewing channel that kind of got me into this, and last year they had an advent calendar, and in the advent calendar was my first tiny hexy kind of paper piecing doobry whatsits, and this, which is thread wax, and I had never even thought. So I'd literally done that entire rows, and I'm sitting there threading my needle, it's unthreading itself, and I'm getting knots in it, and I'm watching the video, and Tula's saying that what you do is you put your thread down. Let's take the needle out. Oh, don't put it in my mouth, I'll get into trouble for that again. And you have to make sure that you pull it off like this. So one of the things that I mentioned in my first ever video was where you put your threads on your sewing machine, so that if you have a cross hatch thread like this, you put it on the machine spool holder this way, and if you have one that goes around so that it's not cross hatch, it's totally vertical, then you put it on the vertical thread holder, because it's the way that the thread comes off that's more satisfactory to your machine. Anyway, she said that when you pull it off straight up, you snip it, you thread it, that doing this in a certain way helps to support the thread grain, so all the little hairs that are on the thread, so similar to the grain of your hair, I suppose, and that by doing it so that the threads all go down, when you put it through the needle, when it goes through the fabric, then it's going through in a natural progression rather than kind of being kind of bird as it goes through, so it's less likely to knot. Did that work for me? No. So I'm sure it was probably better than what it could have been, but it was still a total pain in the butt. So I then shared something, and the wonderful friends in Facebook said, oh, somebody started putting something out there about waxing. And I was like, oh, let's have a go at this, because I've got some. It's sat in my sewing box. Wow, it's an absolute game changer. Since I've been waxing my thread, I think I've had 2 knots. And I have probably done at least 2 hours worth of hand sewing. And I was kind of like totally amazed that just one little thing of wax was going to have such amazing difference. So waxing thread, put your finger on it, put it on your little wax ball, pull it through. Sometimes I'll do twice, but to be fair, I haven't actually noticed a difference between doing it once or twice, but you know, once for luck, twice is better. And then the other thing that I had heard about that I wanted to share was after you'd waxed it, someone had mentioned on one of the threads to marry your threads. And I've recently just put a post out when I'd said, you know, these were amazing. Let's wax my thread more often and let's look at marrying thread. And somebody said, well, how do you do that? I was the person about a week ago that said, how do you do that? And somebody said, oh, well, just go and Google it and you'll see. So I thought, well, I'm going to combine all of my potential video into one. So marrying thread is what you do when you don't want your needle to fall off your thread. Which, let's face it, happens to me all the time, because I am one of these people that gets to the last bit like that and I'm looking and I've got a tiny little bit to go and I'm going to force that needle to not come off, and I'm literally down to the last 10th degrees. And I know I shouldn't do it, but typically my needle is falling off all of the time, and it's just, as Tula says, save seconds, not hours. And when you're making a quilt that's going to take you the best part of 5 years, there's a lot of seconds that can be saved there. So what is marrying thread? So I've threaded my needle, and you pull the small tail. So I apologise, my nails are shocking because I've chewed them all since having the girls. Normally, well, they've never been great, but they're normally not this bad, so don't look too closely. You put the small thin part of your thread through your fingers, and then very carefully you push your needle, and it sounds more complicated than it is, but it's not, because your thumb and your forefinger will hold that piece of thread, and as your needle pushes through it, it catches. So I'm going to try and show you that. So yeah, against my scarf, you can see, if I move that up and down, that that little piece of thread has actually been pinned on my needle. So you do that 3 times. Now, is this a little bit faffy? Yes. Does this take more time than threading your needle? Yes. Am I not able to do this because I'm talking to you? Pretty much, but there you go, second time on. And then I probably should have left myself a bit more string than what, or cotton than I have there, but hey ho, never mind, needs must. So pulling it through again. So there, it's on 3 times. So what you then do is hold your needle and then pull the cotton over. And what you've got there is a married thread. So, see, strategically wearing a dark scarf so Yao can see. So what's happened now is that there are no knots. You can't feel anything when you pull through, but your needle doesn't fall off. And that's called marrying. When you get to the end, all you do is snip that off and pull your needle through. Just make sure that because I now do this, I can't go right to the end of my thread, because otherwise I'm going to end up stitching it doubled up. So I suppose that's the best practice, because to be fair, you don't want it too long. Apparently, Tula says you should have it the length of your arm. You don't want to be doing this. It's not an Olympic sport. What you want to be doing is quick, short movements. And yeah, it has been an absolute game changer. I suppose the last thing I might mention is somebody on Facebook Marketplace was selling these, and they're called the Sew Tight magnet things. Again, a Tula thing. And she was selling a whole packet that I would buy from a shop for 35 quid for 15, and you got 15 of them. And I was like, oh, I've got some friends, I can use them as trades and swaps. And I've been using one of these, and they're quite powerful magnets. One thing I have discovered is when putting my pieces together, so after hanging up from you guys, I will be sewing my fox naps together. Instead of, the temptation is to do it this way. So if I'm sewing along this line, and I'm not doing it that way anymore, I'm doing it this way. And the reason for that is it's really difficult to try and move and line up your papers and your fabric edges when it's going across there, because the magnet is so tight you can't really shift it. However, once you've started sewing, it doesn't move. So I'm just finding that it was just taking me forever, and I was pulling it and over egging it and bits were jumping. It was doing my head in. So I've now decided, or I have now found, that the easy way to do it, again, is to do it vertically rather than horizontally, and then it's not necessarily in your way. So, good friends, this is my third video. I didn't think I was ever going to be doing more videos apart from my unboxing, but you know, things change, and I will be updating to see how my La Pasca quilt goes, and then I've got a couple of ideas for other videos. Yeah, I'm not really making this into a channel. I just like to chat. I just like all of the research and sharing the knowledge, and I like it when people kind of share their knowledge and their good practices as well. So happy October, have a happy Halloween if we're not all in lockdown, and onwards and onwards with your EPP. Bye.